Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see what if Deku joined the SWAT and returned to save Japan. Here is short summary. Leaving due to his mother's abuse, Izuku leaves to America and comes back after 2 years due to All Might falling ill and Japan's crime rate going up. But as he steps through the common doors, the room that was once filled with hushed whispering and collective banter, now fell into an uncomfortable silence as heads turned and gaped at him. This wasn't the normal Izuku Midoriya knew anymore. Since when was he a member of the SWAT? But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. After completing a refreshing shower, Izuku dried off and donned his SWAT uniform, the fabric molded to his fit physique. He had gained muscle during his years across the sea. He called his assistant, who promptly arrived with a duffel bag full of his belongings, filling the small apartment with a faint scent of coffee. "Here you go, Detective Midoriya," she greeted, her tone professional yet friendly. Izuku smiled softly, a subtle hint of warmth breaking through his otherwise stoic demeanor. "Thank you, Yumi. You can head out. I'll be fine from here." He dismissed her with a gentle nod, which she returned with a quick flash of a smile before exiting. Turning his focus to the paperwork piled on his desk, he continued filling out reports from a plethora of situations he dealt with during the week. The peaceful atmosphere, however, was abruptly disrupted by the crackling of his earpiece. It was his second day back and he was already more popular than he'd thought he'd be. Code 217, hostage situation reported at the Silver Spoon. Requesting immediate backup. Over. Izuku stood up, adrenaline pulsing through him like fire. The calm veneer shattered in an instant, replaced by focused determination. "Deploying now," he responded, grabbing his gear and bolting out of the apartment. The Silver Spoon was a popular restaurant, known for its exquisite cuisine and vibrant atmosphere. Tonight, however, it lay under a cloud of tension. Inside, 3 masked individuals held 6 terrified customers at gunpoint, shouting demands filled with desperation and rage. "Stay down. Nobody moves, or they get it," barked one of the criminals, waving his gun back and forth across the room. Izuku arrived at the scene, his heart racing, instincts kicking in. He quickly surveyed the layout of the restaurant, assessing positions and evaluating potential threats. The flickering lights cast ominous shadows as he reached for his earpiece. "Midoriya reporting in. I'm on the scene with SWAT. What's the current status?" he inquired, his voice steady and level-headed. 3 armed suspects inside. Hostages are mostly unharmed, but fear levels are rising. "We need to get you in a position to negotiate without putting anyone at risk." "We're covering the exits," the commanding officer instructed. Izuku nodded, even though they couldn't see him. "On it. I'm moving to the left side of the entrance." He slipped into the shadows to position himself, mentally preparing for the confrontation. As he stepped into view, one of the suspects caught sight of him, panic etched across his features. "What the?" The man barely had time to react before Izuku spoke up, his voice calm and direct. "Let the hostages go. You won't want to do this. There's still time." He raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat, feeling the weight of the gun strapped to his hip. "Shut up, hero. Do you think you can just swagger in here and save the day? You've got no idea what we're capable of." Another assailant screamed, pointing the weapon dangerously at one of the frightened patrons. At that moment, time seemed to slow. Izuku assessed the situation. The tension in the air was thick, possibly hanging on a knife's edge. With a surge of adrenaline, he decided to act. In one seamless motion, he drew his weapon, steadied it, and aimed. The loud crack of gunfire shattered the standoff as his shot rang true, the weapon flying from the hands of the third assailant. Chaos erupted as Izuku dove in, adrenaline guiding his movements while the SWAT team flooded in behind him. "Get the hostages out," he barked over the noise, focusing on neutralizing the second criminal. A scuffle ensued, and in a moment of vulnerability, he felt the bite of a bullet shot his shoulder as he turned and flipped into a backflip behind a counter. Pain flared, but it was nothing compared to the trials he had faced before. He gritted his teeth and pushed through it. With swift, practiced movements, he quickly looked down and assessed his wound before jumping over the counter. He utilized a combination of martial arts and strategic positioning, managing to pin one of the suspects to the ground while the SWAT team swiftly apprehended the others. The hostages were secured, ushered out of harm's way amidst a flurry of activity. Once the scene was secured and medical personnel tended to the hostages, Izuku allowed himself a moment to breathe, his pain throbbing. The adrenaline began to fade, revealing the dull ache radiating from his shoulder. He glanced down, noting the blood seeping through his uniform. Had he already needed another uniform? Hero down, teased one of the other officers, a smirk on his face as Izuku strolled out of the building. Izuku smirked and sent a wink before shrugging his shoulders and going over to his police car. Nah, just a scratch. He rummaged through the department glove before finding the empty report papers. As the heavy door of the hero department swung open, Izuku Midoriya stepped inside, a reliable air of confidence enveloping him. His black hair framed his face, and the tattoos that peeked out underneath his sleeves ran a different demeanor off of him. What had once rang out with light banter and dotting pencils and pens, now etched with a heavy silence with his presence. Beside him was Yumi. They walked over to an empty table across from the others, drawing curious glances. Yumi's heart raced not just from being in an unfamiliar environment but from being so close to Izuku, the man who had once been her closest friend and had morphed into someone new, someone captivating. "Hey Yumi, can you please fetch me?" Before he could finish, her hands lifted palm up, and a golden glow flashed and disappeared, his normal clothes appearing before him. He smiled, dropping his duffel bag on the table with a thud, and turned to her fully. "You always know what a man wants." Yumi's cheeks flushed pink as she placed the clothes on the table beside the bag. "Sir, I would appreciate it if you kept focused more on attending to your wound than flirting." She straightened her back, brushing her green hair behind her shoulders, the authority in her voice a stark contrast to her flustered demeanor. They locked eyes for a fleeting moment, his eyebrows raised in a playful question. "Can't I have a little fun with my favorite girl?" Izuku teased, running a hand through his matted black hair. His grin was mischievous, like a feline that had just caught sight of its prey. Yumi rolled her eyes good-naturedly but knew how to steer their banter back. "You really need to take care of that shoulder, Izuku. Though I guess it might be a challenge for you now, huh?" She glanced pointedly at the blood-soaked bandage peeking out from beneath his shirt. Izuku's playful demeanor faded for a moment as he focused on the pain that pulsed beneath the surface of his skin. "All right, let's get this taken care of." As he moved to remove his shirt, he caught glimpses of his former classmates whispering amongst themselves. They were surprised, some too shocked to approach him. He ignored their stares, his focus on Yumi, who found a medical kit in the duffel bag and diligently prepared to dress his wound. "An extraction kit?" she questioned, raising an eyebrow. "Didn't anyone teach you that pulling a bullet out on your own is not going to end well for your ego?" Izuku shrugged, a faint humorous glint in his eye. "It was a quick decision. Besides, I had limited access and a few minutes. It was either that or wait and bleed out." He put his hand over the wound, beginning to work at the bandage. "Are you always this reckless? Do you want to fight the world on your own?" Her eyes narrowed with mild exasperation, mirroring the scars she'd seen left behind by his calls to adventure. "Getting shot is a part of the job, Yumi. Just like thinking a little further ahead would keep you on your toes." He grimaced, dismissing her concern with a casual wave. She rolled her eyes as he neatly cut the bandage from his shoulder, revealing the wound. With a calm professionalism that contrasted his previous self, he methodically extracted the bullet. Yumi's breath hitched slightly but she held her ground, not wanting to show her unease. She quickly cleaned the wound and wrapped a fresh bandage around it, hands steady from years of training. Izuku grunted as he finished wrapping his shoulder, wiping sweat from his brow. In that moment, he traded glances with her, an odd understanding shared between them. There were unsaid words of gratitude and companionship. Once he was redressed, they packed up the medical kit. Just as they gathered themselves to leave, Bakugo abruptly got up from his chair and marched over to them, stepping in front of Izuku's way, blocking the door. "You got a goddamn death wish, Deku," he snapped, his usual tough edge surfacing. Ignoring us like you're some hotshot after your little self-extraction operation. You think you're better than us. Before Izuku could dismiss his former friend, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Fetching it out, he recognized his SWAT team's number and picked up, waving his hand of dismissal to the blonde and turned away. Midoriya here. Deku, we're hitting up the bar tonight to celebrate you being back in Japan. You in? Came the enthusiastic voice of one of his former SWAT teammates, Roku. Izuku weighed his options quickly, shooting a knowing glance at Yumi and then back at Bakugo, whose scowl deepened. Sure, we can have a drink after I handle some business, he replied, which was more cryptic than any of them would have preferred. He glanced over at Yumi and caught her expression of confusion. As he hung up the phone, he noticed her facial change, part worry, part intrigue. She tried to protest. Izuku, you just got back. Should we really be going out and drinking already? You need to rest, especially after. Especially after what? Izuku interjected smoothly, a sly smirk creeping across his lips as he wrapped his arm around Yumi's shoulders, pulling her close. Don't sweat it, darling. It's my first night back, and I've got the night off from both divisions. No one wants one of their strongest heroes working while he's recovering from a gunshot wound, right? He leaned in closer, his voice lowered to a near whisper. Besides, wouldn't you rather be my date tonight? Beneath her feigned shock, Yumi's cheeks flushed, alternating between disbelief and an excited apprehension. The others were equally bewildered by Izuku's demeanor, the transformation stunning and surreal. This was a new Izuku, assured and undeniably charming, without a hint of the introverted nervousness they once knew. Wait, are you seriously suggesting going out for drinks? Bakugo's tone shifted, shifting from anger to incredulity. You think that's a smart move after getting shot? Yumi shot Izuku an appraising glance, her dark brows furrowed. You're being reckless, Izuku. Izuku shrugged, a flicker of amusement dancing across his lips. You say that like it's new information. Besides, he added, lowering his voice, we both know this job isn't for the faint-hearted. The way he said it held no warmth, just a calculating edge, leaving no room for argument. Izuku met Bakugo's gaze, half expecting Bakugo's familiar anger. I don't think I'm better than you, I just don't have time to be caught up in your melodrama, Bakugo. Yumi stepped back, giving them some space, her eyes wide, not wanting to interfere but not willing to abandon Izuku either. Bakugo's anger was a palpable force, one that often pushed Izuku into a corner in the past. But things were different now. Recognition swept over his former classmates like a wave, their expressions a volatile mix of shock, admiration, and lingering disbelief. But they kept their distance, uncertain how to approach the man he had become. The tension surged as Bakugo stepped closer, his face a storm of anger. If you really think you can just stroll in here and act like everything's fine while forgetting how you treated us, especially me, you must be delusional. It's as if you've forgotten how things used to be. Things have changed, Izuku replied, his voice dripping with authority. You're not my friend, you're just a hostile acquaintance now, and I'm fine with leaving it like that. Bakugo's face darkened, fury radiating off him like heat from a flame. You think you can just walk away from this? From me, you think I won't take your ass down where you stand if you keep acting like a goddamn idiot? Because I will, Deku. I'll kill you before you realize what hit you. The break room fell silent, eyes wide as they watched the confrontation unfold. Uraraka, standing a few feet away, gasped softly, her hand shooting up in protest. Dynamite, you can't just. But Izuku cut her off, stepping into Bakugo's personal space with an unsettling calm. If you're making a threat to a SWAT member, I suggest you rethink that, he said, his voice low and authoritative. Threatening me could cost you more than just a pride trip, it could put your future on the line. Bakugo hesitated, the fire in his eyes dimming just a fraction as he searched Izuku's face for any sign of weakness. The reality registered for a split second. He was facing a member of an elite unit, and threatening someone with that kind of power wasn't just unwise, it was reckless. I'll be damned if I let you act all high and mighty, not after everything that happened, Bakugo finally muttered, his bravado waning as Izuku's stare pinned him down. Without breaking their impasse, Izuku turned slightly, addressing the rest of the group who had watched the exchange unfold. Kirishima, ever the peacekeeper, took a step forward. Izuku, we're not just standing by. We want to keep in touch. Maybe we can make plans to hang out like old times. Izuku regarded Kirishima for a moment, a flash of something softer fading away quickly. He pulled out a card, emblazoned with his name and number, and slapped it against the table in front of Kirishima with a confident, almost playful grin. If you want to keep in touch, use this, he shrugged. I'm not turning my back on friends who actually want to be friends. Just remember, be careful what you wish for. His gaze turned back to Bakugo, the coldness returning as he continued, and if you wish to end up in jail because of your pride, that's not my choice to make, Bakugo. Just remember that. Bakugo's anger simmered, and a new uncertainty flickered in his eyes, visibly taken aback by the stark reality Izuku was presenting. But pride still swirled within him, clashing desperately against the growing sense of vulnerability that fought against his instinct to lash out. Whatever, Bakugo snarled, turning on his heel, but his voice wavered momentarily. Don't think I'm just gonna stand back and let it go. As they moved towards the door, Bakugo's voice erupted once more. If you don't want to walk around acting high and mighty, keep your head down, Deku. He spat the last word as if it were poison on his tongue. Izuku paused at the exit, turning slightly over his shoulder to appreciate the white-hot anger radiating from Bakugo. Do you really think this is about pride? I don't fight petty battles anymore. He grinned, a smile laced with an edge. But I'll be sure to remember that you tried to threaten a member of the elite SWAT. I might just have to add it to my report. Bakugo tensed, rage still surging under his skin. You think you can just throw around your badge and assume it'll keep you safe? Get the hell out of my way, Deku. Stop making hogwash threats, and I might just do that. Izuku met him head-on, a mixture of authority and unyielding focus driving his words. You think you can hurt me? Do you want to try? Because I assure you, I'm not the same coward you used to bully. The room was weighty with disbelief. Izuku didn't back down. He stood tall and unyielding. He'd fought to regain everything he had lost. Besides, he continued, taking a breath, that little stunt could land you in jail, and I'll be the one writing the report. Just then, a crackling from his walkie-talkie broke the charged silence, and Izuku smirked at the impeccable timing. Locking eyes, he picked up the talkie and pressed the side. This is Midoriya, reporting for 10:40 seconds. The room fell into a silence. Izuku felt a surge of satisfaction as the walkie-talkie crackled back with a clear acknowledgement of his status. Bakugo's face was a mask of disbelief, the simmering ire in his eyes revealing just how chaotic the misunderstanding had sent his mind spiraling. A few of Bakugo's colleagues shared hesitant glances, their eyebrows raised, clearly uncertain about what they had just overheard. Did you just report him? One of the newer heroes stammered, his voice laced with apprehension, glancing between Bakugo and Izuku as if bracing for an explosion. Izuku rose an eyebrow, amusement flickering in his green eyes. Gets you to think about threatening an officer, doesn't it? He quipped, pulling at his charcoal gloves while letting out a controlled sigh. But no, I was just letting them know I was done for the day. The tension in the room was palpable, and he could almost smell the confusion mixed with the lingering echoless charge of confrontation. A heartbeat later, the static from the walkie-talkie shifted into confirmation. Understood. Have a good night, Deku. Izuku felt the weight of Bakugo's furious gaze, a smirk briefly tugging at the corner of his mouth as he relished the moment. The bromance, or whatever it had been in the past, was a distant memory now, replaced by both of their evolving realities. But he couldn't dwell on that. Now was a time for moving forward. As he turned, he felt the familiar presence of Yumi beside him, that ever-comforting presence that carried an air of mischief. She leaned in, her voice a whisper against his ear, teasing and light. We should invite a few of them to join us, she said, her excitement palpable. Izuku nodded, already scanning the room for familiar faces he wouldn't mind sharing a drink with. Sure, let me handle it. His demeanor shifted seamlessly from tension to charm as he stepped away from the confrontation. Hey, everyone, he called, drawing the attention of the others in the small break room. We're heading out for drinks. Anyone interested in joining? There was a moment of hesitation, then a few eager hands shot up, but he caught Bakugo's scowl lurking in his peripheral vision, a reminder of the brewing storm left unresolved. Wait, Bakugo interjected, a challenging glint igniting in his eyes. You mean I'm not even invited? Izuku's laughter rang out, genuine and unrestrained. He relished Bakugo's bewilderment. It had become a source of amusement to him. Actually, you're not, he said with a playful smirk. Frankly, I don't tend to hang around someone who doesn't respect me or threatens me. Bakugo's face flushed redder than the paint on the walls, a mixture of disbelief and fury twisting his features. He opened his mouth to retort, but Izuku cut him off before he could summon his trademark explosions of anger. Maybe next time, Bakugo, Izuku added casually, finally making eye contact with Yumi, who was stifling a chuckle. But for now, I think we'll take our fun somewhere it's not likely to end with someone being thrown through a wall. Bakugo stood frozen for a moment, fury bubbling beneath his skin. The others around him were increasingly amused, exchanging frivolous glances, and it only amplified his indignation. Izuku turned away with Yumi, the last image of Bakugo's snarl imprinted in his mind. As they stepped outside, the warm air brushed against Izuku's skin, and he felt the comfort of camaraderie surround him. He hadn't realized how much he missed feeling so normal amidst chaos. Yumi was at his side, her vibrant aura lifting his mood further. Izuku couldn't suppress the smile that broke across his face. He adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, feeling renewed energy coursing through him. Yumi walked closely by his side, radiating excitement, and within moments, they were met by Kirishima, Todoroki, and Uraraka, who had decided to accept his invitation. Yo, Izuku, Kirishima grinned, his energy infectious. You ready to hit the town? More than ready, Izuku replied, a hint of mischief in his eyes, and I've got the perfect ride. As they descended the steps of the precinct, Izuku turned toward his police cruiser parked outside, a sleek black vehicle crowned with the emblem that signified SWAT. He could feel the waves of surprise ripple through his friends. Wait, that's your car. Uraraka's eyes widened. You've seriously got a police car? Of course. Gotta make a statement, right? Izuku shrugged, a confident grin pulling at his lips. His hand casually adjusted a tattoo sleeve peeking out from under his shirt. Shivers of thrill ran through him as he unlocked the vehicle with a click. This is awesome. Kirishima climbed into the backseat, unable to contain his excitement. As Todoroki and Uraraka slid in, Yumi hopped into the front passenger seat beside Izuku. She shot him a playful smirk, her amusement evident. This definitely beats a regular sedan. Let's show these guys a good night. Buckle up, Izuku called back, adjusting the rearview mirror as he revved the engine. With that, he peeled away from the curb, the cruiser's growl filling the air. The ride was filled with laughter and camaraderie, punctuated by Kirishima's frequent exuberance and Uraraka's playful teasing. Seeing the city pass by in a blur felt invigorating, a world away from the shadows of his past. He skillfully maneuvered through traffic, occasionally glancing toward Yumi, who gave him an encouraging thumbs up. When they finally arrived at the bar, Izuku parked with practiced ease, the others clamoring out eagerly. The neon lights spilled onto the sidewalk, a threshold into a world where the strains of laughter and music thrummed in the air. As they entered, the bar came alive. A bustling atmosphere packed with people vibing to the rhythmic beat of life was all around them. Just as they stepped over the threshold, a boisterous shout rang out from across the room. Deku, his SWAT team erupted in unison, racing towards him, their faces lighting up with excitement. Izuku leaned against the booth, allowing the raucous laughter of his friends to wash over him, a welcome contrast to the tension that had come earlier that day. He took a sip of his drink, glancing over at Yumi, who was deeply engrossed in their animated conversation, her laughter lighting up the room around them. It felt good to be back, to taste freedom and camaraderie again. But the earlier encounter with Bakugo loomed in his mind, dulling the brightness of his surroundings for just a moment. Hey, Kirishima called out, still hyped from his arm wrestling victory over Todoroki. What was up with you and Bakugo earlier? It was like a scene out of a movie. He gestured animatedly, earning a few laughs from the others at the table. Izuku leaned forward, a smirk dancing on his lips. I swear, I expected him to explode again. He really couldn't handle the fact that I had the nerve to come back and be a part of the team again. It's like he forgot who he was dealing with. Oh yeah, Uraraka teased, he did threaten to kill you right before you walked up to him. That was scary. True, Izuku replied nonchalantly, but the memory still thrilled him as he recalled closing the distance, being nose to nose with Bakugo. The growl in his friend's voice had been serious, but so was his own. By the way, I wasn't joking when I said I'd handcuff him right there. Yeah, and then shot. Literally. Kirishima punctuated, laughing loudly. You were out there on a SWAT call and you got shot. In our first hangout back together. What kind of drama is this? Just another Tuesday, right? Izuku mused with an easy smile, though inside he felt the familiar tightening of his instincts. Thanks to Bakugo's short fuse, the tension was simmering just beneath the surface, but it was all external now. He'd trained hard to become calm under pressure. He couldn't let the chaos of his past spill into his present. Yumi chimed in, laughter bubbling just under her words. I think he missed you so much he just forgot how to communicate. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, and Izuku couldn't help but grin back, appreciating her ability to lighten the mood. Yeah, about as much as a bomb misses its target, Izuku replied with a chuckle, his gaze wandering to the door, half expecting Bakugo to burst through at any moment, making a scene. But the only thing that entered was a server bringing their food, steam rising and appetites roaring. As everyone dove into their meals, Izuku found himself filtering through the banter, occasionally catching Yumi's eye. Their playful exchanges spiraled into a comfortable rhythm, but finally, he caught up with his own thoughts. They were blurred by the drinks and laughter, and when the night wore on, the jokes turned into plans for their next missions together. Beyond the teamwork and tactical planning, his partnership with Yumi was something he'd never taken for granted. Hours later, the sun peeked through the sheer curtains of Yumi's apartment, painting the room in a soft, golden hue. Izuku's eyes fluttered open slowly, his groggy mind wrestled with the remnants of a blurred memory. The previous night returned in flashes, a jumbled series of warmth, laughter, and the unmistakable connection to Yumi that felt deeply familiar yet fragile. He shifted slightly, expecting to feel the chill of the floor against his feet, but instead, he found himself under a cozy blanket sprawled on her couch. It took him a few seconds to orient himself, the faint scent of her shampoo lingering in the air. The flashes of Yumi shouting at him to calm down mixed with slices of her laughter left him feeling oddly at peace. As he sat up, a small groan escaped his lips. Am I gonna regret whatever I did last night? He muttered, rubbing a hand through his newly dark locks. Surprisingly, no, Yumi's voice chimed from the kitchen, baking softly amidst the sound of sizzling. You were the responsible one. Letting Kirishima and Uraraka make fools of themselves while you kept your cool. Izuku blinked, confusion etched on his face. Really? What did I say? Nothing abusive or reckless. You kept the peace after a while. You spent more time being charming than wild, which is new. She turned around, her teasing smile softening when her eyes met his. In fact, you might have impressed some of the guys. He returned her smile with a chuckle, relieved. Well, I guess that's a win. Maybe I do owe Bakugo a thank you for not killing me after all. Don't push your luck, she warned playfully, settling down next to him. The warmth of her presence brought an unexpected comfort. But really, I'm glad you're back. Me too, he replied, just above a whisper, the words carrying a weight he hadn't realized he'd been longing to express. The room felt smaller, and without thinking, he leaned closer, caught between the memories of why he left and the promise of what was to come. The atmosphere in the hero department was bustling, a stark contrast to the quiet resolve Izuku felt inside. He navigated through the crowd, greeting fellow heroes and officers alike with ease, his calm demeanor turning heads. Whispers followed in his wake. While he had changed in more ways than one, his reputation as that kid who was bullied was beginning to fade, replaced by the presence of an undeniable force. Hey, Izuku, shouted Kirishima, who dashed toward him like a burst of energy. You ready to handle some villains today? His enthusiastic voice broke through the muffled exchanges of others, catching Izuku's attention. Always, but don't forget to watch out for those exploding surprises, Izuku quipped, reminiscent of their friendly banter from UA. They exchanged knuckle bumps, an unspoken acknowledgement of their journeys since their days as fresh heroes. Just waiting to catch one on camera. Oh, wait, I should have brought my phone. Kirishima laughed, shaking his head in faux despair. Maybe next time, Kiri. Right now, let's focus. Izuku's voice dropped a notch, guiding the conversation into the serious territory as they stepped into the briefing room. The stark whiteboard was filled with maps and notes, a reflection of the chaos outside their walls. As they settled in, Izuku found himself flanked by Yumi and Kirishima, who were both intently listening to the briefing officer. Izuku leaned forward slightly, his body poised with an ease that came from years of intensive training. His presence was commanding, a radiating confidence shaped by his time as a SWAT team member in America. He wore a simple tactical uniform that hugged his well-built physique, accentuating his numerous tattoos, swirling black patterns coiling around his arms like a mythological serpent, hinting at his transformation from the timid boy he once was. As the briefing officer went over the details, Izuku's eyes narrowed and darted across the map sketched on the whiteboard, taking in every detail with surgical precision. Every movement he made was deliberate, calculated, embodying a sense of purpose that was both intimidating and inspiring. Kirishima leaned in closer, watching as Izuku's fingers danced over the contours of the map. I can't believe how much you've changed, man. You used to be so. He trailed off, searching for the right word. Neurotic. Izuku smirked, a confident glint in his eye. Life has a way of forcing growth on you. Besides, I prefer knowing I can handle myself now. Then, with a swift motion, he rose from his seat, heading toward the marker board to add his insights. As he moved, his gait exhibited a subliminal grace. It was the confidence of someone who knew their body intimately, having spent hours practicing martial arts. He had trained in multiple disciplines, karate, jiu-jitsu, and boxing, merging them into a fluid fighting style that was a spectacle to behold. Fingers deftly grasping a marker, Izuku sketched out potential paths for a tactical approach, applying what he had learned in the field. If we flank to the north, he indicated, his tone steady, we can create a diversion, allowing the SWAT units here and here to initiate a coordinated strike while keeping the civilians' safety in mind. By utilizing mixed martial arts techniques in close quarters, I can subdue any villains without escalating the situation. The briefing officer nodded, impressed by Izuku's insights. That's a solid plan. You seem to have adapted your skills nicely. Izuku shrugged, a casual but confident smile playing on his lips. Thanks. It's just about staying 2 steps ahead. His teammates looked at him in awe, but there was no hesitation in his voice, just a steady resolve that inspired confidence. Think about how you approached confrontation back in UA, he said, addressing Kirishima and fellow officers. Remember the importance of angles and positioning. Take charge of your space. Fight smart, not just hard. With that, he demonstrated an elegant jab and block combo in the air, the seamless transition between strikes and defensive maneuvers like a flowing dance. He pivoted on the balls of his feet, emphasizing the significance of strong stances that gave him grounding. Kirishima's eyes widened. Whoa, I'm honestly jealous. I've always wanted to be able to move like that. Focus and practice. If you're serious about mastering martial arts, just remember the basics. It all builds from there, Izuku encouraged, his tone gentle yet firm as if guiding his friends through the early days of their training back in UA. The officer's voice reverberated through the room, laying out the day's operations with precise clarity. We've received reports of a villain group operating in the heart of Shibuya. They've been causing disturbances and are suspected of planning something bigger. Your objective is to gather intel, minimize civilian casualties, and apprehend any targets you come across. Izuku's sharp gaze focused on the maps as he moved away from the board and allowed the superior officer to engage, mentally strategizing routes and possible outcomes. The adrenaline began to pulse through him, igniting the familiar thrill that accompanied every mission. He glanced sideways at Kirishima, who wore a determined expression, and Yumi, who was jotting down notes with remarkable speed. I'll take point, Izuku declared, his voice calm yet authoritative. We can split into 2 teams to cover more ground. Hiroshima and Yumi, you'll monitor the southwest perimeter. I'll take the northeast with the backup squad. The room fell silent as his words were absorbed, a testament to how much had changed in the way he commanded respect. Hiroshima nodded vigorously. Got it. We'll make sure to keep the area secure. Just stay alive out there, okay? Always, Izuku replied, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips, but the look in his eyes was serious. The weight of past experiences lay heavily on his shoulders, and he was determined not to overlook any potential danger. Once the briefing was over, the teams moved out, and Izuku found himself slipping into the familiar rhythm of a leader. He strategized quickly. Once we're on site, I want constant communication. If you see anything unusual, report it immediately. Don't take unnecessary risks. His tone was level, commanding yet supportive. He had learned to balance both sides over the years. His team nodded, and they made their way to the designated location. As they arrived, Akihiko, one of the newer officers, looked at him with wide eyes. How do you stay so calm? Aren't you worried? Izuku paused, his brow furrowing for just a moment. If I let the fear consume me, I won't be able to protect anyone. You learn to compartmentalize, he replied, sounding wiser than his years. Trust your training. Izuku took a deep breath, letting the warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee wrap around him like a comforting embrace. The cafe hummed with soft chatter, and the sun pierced through the wide glass windows, casting golden rays across their table. Hiroshima animatedly recounted a clumsy tango he had attempted during a recent team-building exercise, while Uraraka laughed, her cheeks flushed with amusement. Yumi, with her usual cleverness, countered with a story about her own experience trying to teach him some stealth techniques, though it eventually ended in comic disaster. Honestly, that's amazing. I can't believe you actually tried to tango, Hiroshima, Uraraka exclaimed between giggles. Hey, don't knock it until you try it. You never know, I might become the next dance sensation. Hiroshima shot back, puffing out his chest dramatically. Just as he took a sip of his coffee, the familiar buzz of his walkie-talkie interrupted the light-hearted conversation. All units, we have reports of a barricaded subject at the intersection near Shin-Tokyo Plaza. Suspect is armed and has taken civilians hostage. Code 136. All available teams, respond. Izuku stared at the device for a moment, the coffee cup pausing midway to his lips. A flicker of determination flashed in his eyes as he set the cup down. Guess I'm on duty, he muttered, but his voice was calm, well practiced. Yumi snapped her fingers, her quirk working effortlessly as she summoned Izuku's duffel bag from the corner of the cafe, the heavy material appearing in a puff of sparkles. Get ready, you've got this. Izuku quickly stood up, unzipping the bag as he made his way to the bathroom. I'll be really quick, he called back, already focused on the task at hand. As soon as he entered the restroom, it felt like a portal into another world. He stepped into the stall, and with remarkable speed, thanks to his training, he stripped off his casual clothes and slipped into his SWAT armor. Every piece of the gear, from the bulletproof vest to the fitted tactical pants, clicked into place seamlessly, the weight of it now a comfort rather than a hindrance. In under a minute, he was transformed and ready for action, just as he had promised himself. He burst out of the restroom, his heart racing in sync with the adrenaline coursing through his veins, and raced past them with speed, their hair flowing in the wind he left behind. Hiroshima looked on with wide eyes, a mix of admiration and awe etched across his face. Wow, when he said he could handle it, man was he not lying, he commented, shaking his head. Izuku didn't hear his friend's words, already outside and darting towards their response vehicles. As he approached the scene in the SWAT van, the world around him became sharper, his focus narrowing down to the task ahead. The streets were cordoned off, police barricades set up, while news reporters and curious onlookers crowded beyond a safe distance. Where's the suspect? He barked to a nearby officer, pulling out his sniper as he expertly moved into position. He quickly absorbed the environment, recognizing potential threats and escape routes before he set his sights on the barricaded location. Second floor of that building. The officer shouted back, pointing towards a nearby structure. Civilians are still inside. The suspect has a firearm and hasn't made any demands. Izuku's expression shifted. He focused his breathing, centering his mind as he settled the sniper onto the ledge. He locked onto the second-floor window, considering angles and the distance, calculating the risks. Communications check. Everyone report status, Izuku commanded through his earpiece, a habit that had become second nature. Team A in position, ready for your signal, came the reply from his backup squad. Team B is monitoring the area, ready to provide cover if needed, another voice chimed in. His finger hovered over the trigger, gaze steady. For a moment, everything else faded. The laughter from earlier, the warmth of coffee, the chaos below. It was just him, the sniper, and the responsibility to protect those who hadn't had a choice. Hold steady, everyone. We're going to make this right, Izuku said, voice calm yet firm, as he prepared to act, aware that the path before him was fraught with danger but also ripe with opportunity to protect those who needed it most. His finger hovered over the trigger, gaze steady. For a moment, everything else faded. The laughter from earlier, the warmth of coffee, the chaos below. It was just him, the sniper, and the responsibility to protect those who hadn't had a choice. Hold steady, everyone. We're going to make this right, Izuku said, voice calm yet firm, as he prepared to act, aware that the path before him was fraught with danger but also ripe with opportunity to protect those who needed it most. As he surveyed the commotion below, Izuku's mind worked like a well-oiled machine, every detail captured in his sharp focus. The chaos was almost comforting, a reminder of why he had trained so hard in America. Every muscle in his body was taut with anticipation as he weighed his options. Visual confirmation on the suspect, he queried, his voice steady as he engaged in a quick mental assessment of the situation. Negative, 0. Replied a voice through the earpiece, a nickname that had followed him after his tenure in America due to his ability to keep a clear head in emergencies. We have no eyes inside, but we're seeing movement on the second floor. Copy that, he said, inching his way closer to the edge to get a better view of the window. With the sun dipping low, shadows stretched across the building, giving him the perfect cover. Switch to thermal. Look for heat signatures, he commanded, tapping his goggles. He watched as the digital display adjusted, revealing hints of movement in the building. 2 individuals were huddled in one corner, a hostage, and what seemed to be the suspect pacing just a few feet away, firearm clutched tightly in his hands. Visual confirmed. Male, late 20s, sporadic movements, he noted, the calmness in his voice belying the tension racing through his veins. The hostage is a woman, mid-20s, she appears frightened but unharmed. 0. We recommend a tactical breach, a voice interrupted, but Izuku cut them off sharply. No, not yet, we can't risk her life. As he waited, he focused on his breathing, a technique he picked up during countless hours of meditation and mental training. His heart rate slowed as he honed in on the suspect's movements, waiting for the right moment. Team A, prepare for an extraction maneuver on my mark. Team B, cover the perimeter for any potential exits, he instructed, each word delivering authority that highlighted his role as the lead operative. Communications are key. Maintain silence until I give the signal. He wanted to give the suspect a chance to de-escalate. In his experience, sometimes the best way to handle a hostage situation was not only through force but by offering an out. His jaw clenched slightly as he watched the man pull at his hair, pacing like a caged animal. Suspect is agitated, one of his teammates relayed. He keeps checking the window as if expecting someone. I know, Izuku muttered under his breath, keeping his focus. Stay with me, people. We can handle this. Just as he was about to switch tactics and try to establish a dialogue from his position, the unexpected happened. Look, he's raising the gun. One officer shouted. Without a moment to waste, Izuku adjusted his sniper rifle, his breath catching. Chima, posture to breach. I'm taking the shot if you can't distract him. Copy. Static crackled through the earpiece, but he didn't wait, watching as the man raised the gun and the woman cried out. Each second stretched, but his training had prepared him for this. He tracked the target, aligning his sights, finger brushing gently against the trigger, ready to pull if the situation went south. Hold, he breathed, time slowing down as everything crystallized around him. The sound of a distant siren wailing, the panic in the woman's eyes, the desperation emanating from the suspect. Then, in an unexpected twist, the suspect's cell phone rang, startling him. The momentary distraction gave Izuku the time he needed. "Now," he called, watching as Team A advanced on the door. With swift precision, he squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing in the streets as the bullet struck the wall behind the suspect's head, a warning shot meant to startle, not harm. The suspect jumped, gun dropping from his hand. "Now, Team A, move." With adrenaline coursing through him, he kept his eyes trained on the terrified hostage, watching her as rescuers stormed into the building, and relief washed over him when she was quickly ushered to safety. As the suspect was apprehended, Izuku felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders again. Deep breath. Mission accomplished. He disengaged from the weapon, removing his goggles and looking out towards his squad as they secured the scene. "Great job, everyone," he affirmed, the tension from moments ago dissipating as adrenaline began to fade. "Get the medics up here, the hostage needs looking after." As he descended from his position, he couldn't help but feel the familiar sense of purpose wash over him. This was where he belonged, fighting for others, protecting the innocent, and he was determined to make a difference, no matter the personal cost. "Welcome back, Zero," one of his teammates smirked, knowing the nickname had a different weight now. And for the first time since his return, Izuku smiled, the cool confidence he had cultivated shining through. The moonlight cast eerie shadows in the office that Izuku occupied on the second floor of the police department. The hour was late, near midnight, and the usual hum of activity had subsided, leaving only a few officers on duty. Izuku preferred it this way, the quieter the better. He had just returned from an operation and now sat at his desk, illuminated by the harsh glow of the overhead lights. Gone were the soft features and youthful innocence, replaced instead by a sharp, angular jawline and a hardness in his eyes. His once short and spiky hair was now long, black, and pulled back into a tight ponytail. Tattoos snaked up his arms and across his neck, visible even beneath his black button-up shirt. Scars, old and new, crisscrossed his face, a testament to the dangerous life he had chosen. Izuku's broad shoulders filled the room, a stark contrast to the slim, boyish figure he once had. His hands, once delicate and soft, were now calloused and rough from years of handling weapons and physical training. He had been gone for 2 years, and in that time, he had changed drastically. He was no longer the same Izuku who had left, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He was colder now, sharper, more focused. The job had hardened him and molded him into the perfect weapon. He had seen things, and done things, that no one should ever have to. But it was necessary, he told himself. It was all for the greater good. As he sat at his desk, typing out reports and filling out paperwork, he couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment from the world around him. He had become so used to the violence and death, that it no longer affected him, and, sitting here on this chair, made him itch to go out for a fight, for a mission, anything to see action, to feel action. He had become desensitized to it all. The only thing that mattered now was the mission, and he would stop at nothing to complete it. The only light in the office came from the moon, shining through the window and casting a pale glow on the floor. The rest of the building was dark and quiet, the only sound coming from the clacking of Izuku's keys as he typed. He continued to work, lost in thought, until the early hours of the morning. He had become a different person, someone he no longer recognized. But he couldn't deny that the change had been necessary. He was stronger now, more capable. He could handle anything that was thrown his way, and that was all that mattered. Sometimes he wished it scared him, to be this different. Sometimes, he wondered what it would have been like had he stayed with the Bakugos after he collapsed at their door, but as he sighed and leaned back in his chair, he knew he'd never know. Not that he wanted to. As the sun began to rise, Izuku finally finished his work and stood up to leave. He took one last look around the office, the shadows and moonlight casting long shadows on the walls, and turned off the light. He walked out the door, ready to face whatever the day had in store for him. The air was thick with tension as Izuku and the SWAT team huddled around the battered van, its windows obscured by grime and the early morning sun. This wasn't just any operation. It was a significant raid against one of the most dangerous gang organizations in the city, the Iron Fangs, and they were loaded for bear. Izuku's heart raced, but he kept his pulse steady and calm. The chaos of battle was familiar. It was a rhythm he had once danced to with innocence, but now he moved with a predatory instinct. "All right, listen up," barked their team leader, a seasoned vet with a deep voice that cut through the stillness. "We hit hard and fast. Watch each other's backs. No one gets left behind." The team of 6 men and women nodded, adjusting their gear, double-checking their weapons. Sam, one of the most charismatic members of the team, caught Izuku's eye. His sandy blonde hair glimmered with beads of sweat under the heavy tactical helmet, and even in this grim situation, Izuku felt the familiar tug of attraction. Sam's blue eyes sparkled with determination and a hint of mischief. Izuku offered a lazy smirk, a momentary flirtation that could easily be overlooked by the threat ahead. "Try not to get yourself shot out there, pretty boy," Izuku quipped, his tone teasing but with an undercurrent of seriousness. The way Sam laughed, lightening the weight of the situation, was infectious. "Only if you promise to catch me," Sam shot back with a wink, before falling into a steely focus. As the order to move came, adrenaline surged through Izuku's veins. They moved as a unit, seamlessly navigating to their target, the abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. Gunfire from an earlier raid attempt echoed in the distance, spurring the team on with urgency. Upon reaching the main entrance, Izuku took charge. He edged closer to the door, crouched low, and signaled for the team to fan out. The door swung open, creaking on its rusted hinges. In an instant, a hail of bullets erupted from within, shards of wood splintering around them. "Cover!" Izuku shouted, ducking low as bullets ricocheted off the metal frame. He pulled his weapon, steady and practiced, and moved in with precision. "Go, go, go!" The team surged through, engaging the targets inside with the kind of professionalism gleaned from countless operations. Izuku's wrist flicked expertly, firing rounds that found their mark with deadly accuracy. He could almost feel the thrill of danger spike through him. What was once a fear buried deep was now a hallowed comfort. Sam was by his side, each shot echoing the camaraderie they shared. "Left side," Sam barked, pointing as another gang member appeared, gun raised but not before Izuku pulled the trigger first, the man crumpling to the ground without a sound. They moved deeper into the factory, but chaos reigned. A couple of gang members, clearly on edge, had ducked behind crates, their expressions twisted in anger and desperation. Izuku spotted one of them scrambling for a weapon. The world slowed for a moment. He saw the gun flash, and then there was nothing. "Down!" Sam shouted, lunging and tackling Izuku behind a large metal beam, just as bullets whizzed past, grazing the intense energy between them. Sam's breath hot against Izuku's ear sent a thrill down his spine, but there was no time to revel in it. "On 3, we're going to push out," Izuku whispered, his voice low yet steady. Sam nodded, steely resolve etched across his beautiful face. 1, 2, 3. They pushed out, weapons raised, moving together again as one cohesive force. They moved smoothly as they cleared one room before diving into the next, Izuku's heart thrumming in time with the gunfire. The factory was a labyrinth fraught with danger. From the shadows, a rapid-fire barrage overwhelmed them, forcing Izuku to roll behind a large machine. He felt the piercing sting of a bullet grazing his side, the rush of pain more a reminder of his mortality than a deterrent. But with a deep breath, Izuku regrouped, firing back without hesitation. The shouting grew louder, a cacophony of voices, shouts of panic, cries of pain, the heavy thuds of bodies hitting the ground. Gory scenes unfolded around him. A few officers, their uniforms soaked crimson, lay motionless, shadows of lives disrupted by violence. Izuku's heart hardened. He pushed deeper into the fray, closing in on a pair of gang members who fired wildly. "Cuff him," he shouted, even as he ducked under another spray of bullets. The world narrowed around him until it was just him and the mission: take them down, apprehend the targets. Suddenly, an explosion rattled the structure, sending a shockwave that knocked Izuku off his feet. Dust danced in the air around him amidst the chaos. He shook his head, his ears shot and his vision blurred. He tried shaking his head again, clearing the fog of disorientation, and glanced around for Sam. Izuku. Sam's voice cut through the noise, panic slipping into his usually calm demeanor. Izuku spotted him pinned down, a group of gang members moving in on his flank. Before he could think, Izuku was up, sprinting towards Sam, bullets whizzing by as adrenaline drove him forward. He wouldn't let anything happen to him, not today. Just as he reached Sam, he opened fire, taking out the first two approaching threats and saving his partner. "Let's move," Izuku barked, pulling Sam into a protective hold, and using his body as a shield as they fought their way out of the ambush. As they rounded a corner, the ambush turned into a full-blown shootout. The air crackled with gunfire and the acrid smell of smoke filled their lungs. At a glance, Izuku caught Sam's determined gaze. He felt their chemistry all at once, raw and electric amidst the horror unfolding around them. The dust settled in the air, a thick cloud of debris that clung to the sunlight streaming through. Izuku and Sam hobbled away from the crumbling factory, the booming collapse reverberating in their ears. Each step felt like lead weights dragging them down, their bodies protesting from the adrenaline crash. The mission had been a maelstrom of chaos, a cacophony of gunfire and shattered glass. The Iron Fangs had fought hard, but they had fought harder. Their breaths came out in ragged puffs, and as they sank to the ground next to their car, Izuku leaned back, pressing his head against the cool metal. He glanced at Sam, who was already grappling with a crumpled pack of cigarettes. His sandy blonde hair was tousled, and sweat mingled with grime on his forehead, making him look even more radiant in that moment. "Just when I thought we were toast," Sam effused, pulling out a cigarette and sticking it between his lips. He fished a lighter from his tactical vest, the small flame casting flickering shadows across their faces as he lit the cigarette. Izuku followed suit, fumbling slightly with his own lighter before getting his cigarette going. The sickly sweet smell of tobacco mixed with the burnt scent of the factory. Izuku inhaled deeply, feeling the nicotine seep into his bloodstream, taking the edge off the adrenaline that had coursed through him just minutes before. Sam burst into laughter, the sound bubbling up and spilling over, brightening the gray tension that hung over them. "Can you believe we almost died?" Sam said between chuckles, his laughter echoing against the backdrop of the city's chaos. "And yet here we are, smoking like it's just another Tuesday." Izuku chuckled softly, the sound a stark contrast to the gruffness that had taken root inside him since returning from his absence. "Only us," he mused, taking a drag and blowing the smoke into the morning sun. "Fight for our lives, and reward ourselves with a cigarette." As if on cue, the growl of an engine broke through their laughter, the distinctive sound of a pair of cars pulling up. Hiroshima and Bakugo jumped out, taking in the scene. Hiroshima's face registered alarm as he hurried over, while Bakugo merely strolled, his eyes fixating on the two SWAT team members, particularly Izuku. "Damn it, you two look like hell," Hiroshima assessed, his tone laced with concern as he crouched down next to them, scanning for visible wounds. "Thanks to the fangs," Sam retorted lightly, exhaling a plume of smoke. Bakugo's sharp gaze narrowed as he approached, his mouth twisting into a scowl. "What the hell were you thinking?" Bakugo barked, his voice dangerously low. "You could have gotten yourselves killed." Izuku's heart twisted at Bakugo's tone. It was a reminder of the confrontation they'd had days ago, the one that had left a bitter taste in his mouth. He shot Bakugo a sidelong glance, the tension thickening between them. "We had it covered, Bakugo," he retorted coolly, not wanting to engage with the fire that crackled in the air. Sam, detecting the shift in atmosphere, smirked devilishly, leaning back slightly to take Izuku's side. "Relax, Bakugo. We made it out with some battle scars and a story for our kids." "Right, Izuku." Izuku flicked his eyes back to Sam, his mouth twitching upward for the briefest of moments. The laughter was a bomb, but the presence of Bakugo bore down hard, threading discomfort through their levity. Bakugo's eyes flicked to Sam, taking note of the cigarette firmly planted in Izuku's mouth. The look on his face was one of barely contained fury mixed with something else that Izuku couldn't pinpoint, maybe concern. F*******ing idiot, Bakugo muttered, his gaze flickering to the burning embers of Izuku's cigarette and then back up to his face. Without another word, Izuku turned and pushed himself to his feet, the lingering pressure of Bakugo's stare too oppressive for comfort. He started to walk away, feeling the weight of scrutiny on his back like an unwanted shroud. "Hey, where are you going?" Sam called after, his laughter fading as he stood, unsure. He glanced at Bakugo, who had not moved an inch. "I need to get checked out," Izuku said over his shoulder, not bothering to look back. His voice was flat, colder than the weather. The chill that had encased him was all too familiar, one he couldn't shake off from the years spent away. "Damn it, Izuku!" Bakugo exploded, and the crackling anger in his voice made Izuku's heart race in a way that was anything but nostalgic. The lingering tension throbbed in the air around them. Sam, however, was unfazed by Bakugo's outburst. He took another drag from his own cigarette, exhaling smoke casually, evidently thriving amidst chaos. "Come on, let's just go get patched up," he urged Izuku, moving closer. The dormitory was quieter than usual, the echoes of the earlier chaos muted by the comforting familiarity of the worn furniture and the hum of the air conditioning. Izuku lay sprawled across a sagging couch, his bare chest exposed to the cool air as he pressed an ice pack against his forehead. The coolness felt good against the heat of his skin, a small reprieve from the lingering tension in his muscles. He had managed to wash away the grime of the factory's collapse before heading back, but the adrenaline costume had left behind its own residual effects, a tightness in his chest that wouldn't quite dissipate. The scars crisscrossing his skin peeked out in stark contrast against the pale unforgiving light of the late afternoon. "Hey, care to share some of that ice?" came a voice from the entrance, a teasing lilt that made Izuku's mouth tighten into a frown before he glanced up. Sam stood in the doorway, his sandy blonde hair tousled and wild like a halo. He wore a t-shirt that clung to his muscled frame, his own battle scars visible in the way he carried himself. "Find your own," Izuku shot back, though he couldn't hide the half-smirk pulling at the corners of his lips. There was an ease with Sam that was hard to shake off, even amidst the heaviness that had settled in his heart since returning. Sam chuckled, stepping into the room and plopping himself onto the edge of the couch. "You sure know how to make a guy feel welcome," he said, nudging Izuku's leg playfully with his own. "You're lucky I didn't hit you with the ice," Izuku replied dryly, turning his gaze back to the ceiling as an effortless sigh escaped him. The ceiling tiles blurred into white squares, and he sought any tranquility in the moment, hoping to push aside thoughts of the confrontation with Bakugo that kept creeping like shadows into his mind. "So, what's the plan for tonight? Cry into our drinks or stare at the ceiling until we feel better?" Sam leaned back, crossing his arms behind his head, and looking far too casual for someone who had just escaped a near-death experience. "Not sure I'm up for drowning my sorrows," Izuku replied, tilting his head and catching Sam's gaze, the teasing glimmer in his friend's eyes almost infectious. He wanted to smile, but thoughts of Bakugo clouded the space between them, that relentless anger from their last encounter still too fresh. "Come on, you think I'd let you sulk all night?" Sam nudged him again, harder this time, and Izuku couldn't help but let out a reluctant chuckle. The laughter faded when the door swung open, and in stepped Bakugo, sharper than ever, his presence both grounding and unsettling the atmosphere in the room. The brusque way he entered spoke volumes, as if he'd eavesdropped on their banter, and Izuku instinctively tensed. Every inch of his being was screaming to cover up, to pull further away, but he lay there, defiantly shirtless and vulnerable among the chaos. "Stop loafing around, you idiot," Bakugo barked, his voice brimming with that familiar heat, but there was an undercurrent of something softer, a hint of concern that Izuku nearly missed. "I'm fine, Katsuki," Izuku replied, coldly as he shifted the ice pack, the irritation wrapping around his voice like a shield. The sight of Bakugo made his skin prickle. This was the person who had nearly shattered all that was left of their camaraderie. There was a jagged line between them now, and he wasn't ready to compromise his newfound edge. Bakugo's eyes roved over the ice pack resting against Izuku's forehead, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Yeah, because you look like shit," he said, crossing his arms over his chest, his tone laced with a peculiar mix of annoyance and something softer, something like worry. Sam, sensing the room shift, sat up straighter and flashed a grin. "He does, doesn't he?" Just about as lovely as ever, Sam quipped, raising an eyebrow at Bakugo, pushing the tension into absurdity. Shut up, Bakugo snapped, though the heat of his glare was softened by the rolling undertones of humor rising within him, just barely surfacing under the weight of his stress. Izuku wanted to laugh along but found himself further entangled in the darkness that loomed where Bakugo was concerned. It's not a fashion show, Bakugo. Is there something you need? He asked coolly, daring to challenge the fiery spark between them. The room quieted, and Bakugo stepped a little closer, his posture shifting, as if he were on the cusp of crossing that fragile boundary. Next time, just listen, you dumbass, he said, almost too softly for Izuku to catch it beneath his tough exterior. You could've. Izuku tossed the ice pack aside as a thin wall of tension grew, dividing the room between the past and the present. He tried to shake off the brewing storm in his chest, one that had nothing to do with his injuries. The sharpness in Bakugo's voice made his heart race, and Izuku hated himself for feeling anything at all. I didn't ask for your concern, he snapped, eyes flashing anew, determined to maintain the distance between them. Sam glanced between the two, a knowing look painting his face as he stood. You know what, I think I've had enough of this popularity contest. I'm heading out, he said, trying to diffuse the undeniable tension that hung like a cloud. He stood up from the chair he sat in front of the dinner table and walked towards the exit but stopped at the couch where Izuku sat. What, you aren't? We were just... Izuku started, but Sam's raised hand cut him off. Drinks. We need drinks, and a change of scenery, don't you think? Sam replied, shooting Izuku a pointed look. Let's go. Izuku hesitated, glancing back at Bakugo. Something twisted uncomfortably in his stomach at the thought of leaving, but the alternative was to stick around with tension thick enough to choke on. Sam knew how to navigate this battlefield, nudging Izuku toward the clear waters of distraction. Fine, he relented, getting to his feet, and the two of them walked past Bakugo, leaving the unspoken words festering behind them. When they arrived at the bar, the dim lighting and upbeat music provided the perfect cover for what Izuku needed, an escape from reality. He sat on a stool, signaling the bartender for drinks, his mind swirling with the remnants of anger and disappointment brought forth by Bakugo's presence. First round's on me, Sam said with a grin, leaning against the bar, an easy confidence radiating from him. Let's drown out that glorious conversation we just left behind. Izuku couldn't help but snicker, although his laughter was tinged with bitterness. Here's to avoiding the people we hate, he proclaimed, lifting his drink high. And what about the people you love? Sam challenged, winking as he downed his own drink. Ha, the people I love don't shove ice packs against my head and tell me I look like shit, Izuku shot back playfully, the seriousness of the day beginning to fade. Sam raised an eyebrow. Sounds to me like you're trying to forget about someone specific. Izuku's smile faltered, the words caught in his throat, suffocated by the memories of Bakugo's sharp eyes and lingering silences. Look, I just want to put distance between us, he muttered, fidgeting with his glass. 2 years away, everything's changed, and I can't go back to what things were before. Then don't, Sam countered instantly, his tone serious now, sensing the weight beneath Izuku's flippancy. You don't have to go back to Bakugo, but you can't keep running away either. It'll eat you alive. A part of Izuku wanted to argue, but deep down he knew Sam was right. With every sip, he felt the warmth of the alcohol spread through him, and the heaviness of the day began to recede, at least for a moment. All right, fine, just tonight, then, he relented, rolling his eyes as he finished off his drink. I'll drown my sorrows if it means I won't be thinking about him the entire time. Now that's the spirit. Sam raised his glass. To vices and bad decisions. Material for future therapy sessions. The two laughed, but the laughter felt thin, barely masking the undercurrents of tension Izuku was still wrestling with inside. As the night went on, he continued to drink, letting the alcohol soften the rigid edges of his thoughts. Each round allowed him to forget, if only momentarily, the storm that had been unleashed by Bakugo's earlier words. Eventually, after a few more drinks, they began to talk more frankly about other things, their time apart, the lessons they had learned, the ways they had grown. But even amid the laughter, There was an underlying wariness, a delicate reminder that some battles were left unresolved. Say, what if Bakugo showed up here? Sam asked, raising an eyebrow. A teasing grin splashed across his face. He won't, Izuku shot back, bitterness creeping back into his tone. He knows I'm avoiding him. You know that's not a long-term solution, Sam said, his voice softening. You need to face him someday. Izuku stared at the bottom of his glass, swirling the remnants like a storm contained within a fragile shell. Yeah, well, maybe tomorrow, he mumbled, avoiding Sam's eye, as he greedily ordered another drink. As the night wore on in the bar, Izuku felt the alcohol flow through him, warming his cheeks and loosening the tension he had held onto since Bakugo's harsh words. He and Sam had moved from shared laughter to giddy conversations about their ridiculous work stories, lightening the burden that had pressed heavily on Izuku's chest. Okay, last drink before we call it a night, Sam insisted, raising a finger to the bartender, who was too busy mixing cocktails to notice at first. And then we can hit the dorms and crash. Or, we didn't dive into some bad decisions firsthand. Izuku shot him a playful glare, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. Do you think I came here to grab a pillow and blanket? It's not like I have a cozy bed waiting for me at the dorms, he replied, shaking his head. But even as he said the words, a flicker of excitement sparked within him. The night was still young, and the taste of freedom was intoxicating. After the last drink settled in, Sam leaned closer, his eyes mischievous. Let's go see if we can find some fun then. Maybe we can turn one of those bad decisions into a good story. Izuku narrowed his eyes at Sam's suggestive tone but didn't object. Lead the way, he said with exaggerated bravado. They stumbled back onto the street, laughter mixing with the cool night air. Izuku found himself exhilarated, the lingering tension from earlier evaporated in the wake of his buzz. He glanced sideways at Sam, who wore an encouraging smile. As they walked, a voice caught Izuku's attention, a smooth voice that dripped with charm. Hey there, hot stuff. Where you headed? Izuku looked up to see a guy leaning against a lamppost, an inviting grin on his face and a spark in his eyes. He had tousled hair and a carefree aura that made Izuku's heart race in an entirely different way from the turmoil Bakugo stirred within him. Sam nudged Izuku lightly. Looks like you've found your bad decision, he said, amusement dancing in his voice. The guy stepped closer, locking eyes with Izuku. I'm Luke, he said smoothly, extending a hand. This is my friend. Izuku, he introduced, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The world around him faded into mere backdrop, and all he could see was the guy standing in front of him. Well then, Izuku, can I interest you in a little adventure? Maybe somewhere warmer, the guy suggested, his voice low and inviting. With the alcohol coursing through his veins and the evening drawing him in, Izuku didn't hesitate, taking a step closer. Yeah, I think I'd like that. Sam grinned broadly and began to usher them toward a nearby taxi. As soon as they were inside, the atmosphere shifted again. This time, it was charged with a sense of urgency. They were both leaning in before the driver even had the chance to pull away, their lips crashing together in a heated embrace filled with curiosity and lust. It was reckless, and intoxicating, and as they tumbled out of the cab and into the halls of the dorm, Izuku couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this kind of exhilaration. They stumbled into the dim light of his room, hands exploring each other's bodies hungrily. But just as they were getting lost in each other, their hands tangled, their breaths mingling, Izuku jolted as the door slammed open, revealing Bakugo standing in the doorway, his expression a mix of shock, confusion, and simmering anger. Deku, Bakugo growled, eyes blazing as he took in the scene. The sight of Izuku tangled up with another guy knocked the breath from him, anger prickling at the back of his neck. Izuku's face fell, the euphoria of the moment crashing down like a heavy wave. Katsuki. He started, but words failed him as embarrassment washed over him. Is this some kind of a joke? Bakugo barked, his fists clenching at his sides. He wasn't sure what bothered him more, seeing Izuku with someone else or the fact that he hadn't recognized Izuku at first. His heart raced, but not with anger, something else twisted within him, something almost vulnerable. This is my life now, Izuku said, forcing himself to regain composure, straightening up slightly. I'm not running away anymore, Bakugo. He glanced at the guy beside him, who offered a reassuring smile, yet Izuku couldn't help the instinctive worry that flicked through him. This could only complicate things further. With that, he leaned in and pressed his lips against the stranger's once more, trying to drown out Bakugo's reaction. But even as they beeped, heat radiating between them, Izuku felt the weight of Bakugo's stare pressed against his back. It felt like a challenge, an insistence on the unfinished business that still brewed beneath everything. As Izuku and his temporary companion, let's call him Kurigo, Izuku had already forgotten his name, tumbled onto the bed, the room spun around them from the alcohol they had consumed. Izuku's head was swimming, but his body felt alive with energy, his skin ignited by Kurigo's touch. They pulled at each other's clothes, discarding them carelessly on the floor, leaving them both bare-chested and breathless. Kurigo's fingers trailed down Izuku's muscular arms, tracing the tattoos that adorned his skin, souvenirs from his time away. Izuku shivered at his touch, a low beep escaping his lips as their bodies pressed together. Izuku wrapped an arm around Kurigo's waist, pulling him closer, and claimed his lips in a deep, passionate beep. His other hand wandered down Kurigo's chest, exploring the firm muscle beneath his fingertips, and found its way to the growing want between them. He broke the beep, breathing heavily as their eyes locked, filled with desire and an intoxicating lust. Izuku's gaze lingered on Kurigo's lips, then drifted down to his neck, where he planted soft, wet beeps that made Kurigo squirm beneath him. Izuku continued his descent down Kurigo's chest, lavishing attention on his nipples, eliciting gasps and sighs. He slipped lower, his tongue tracing a path down Kurigo's abs and stomach, until he reached the source of Kurigo's desire. Taking Kurigo into his mouth, Izuku beeped and teased, his tongue swirling around him as Kurigo's breathing quickened and his fingers found their way into Izuku's hair, gripping tightly. As Kurigo reached the precipice, he begged for release, but Izuku denied him, teasing and denying until Kurigo was writhing and desperate beneath him. When Izuku finally took pity on him, allowing the pleasure to wash over them, the release was shattering, and Kurigo cried out in ecstasy. Izuku climbed back up, settling between Kurigo's legs as he caught his breath. Kurigo pulled him into a deep beep, tasting himself on Izuku's lips, and wrapped his legs around Izuku's waist. As Izuku slid inside, filling him completely, Kurigo gasped against his lips, the two moving together, lost in their own world. Kurigo met Izuku thrust for thrust, their bodies moving in perfect harmony as they chased their release. Izuku's hands gripped Kurigo's hips, pulling him closer, driving deeper, and Kurigo held onto Izuku, digging his fingers into his back as their bodies crashed together. As the pleasure built between them, the tension in Izuku's body unlocked, and the cold, distant exterior melted away. Izuku and Kurigo were lost in their own world as they moved together, their bodies slick with sweat and lust. Izuku's thrusts became more urgent, his hips snapping forward as he chased his release. Kurigo met him thrust for thrust, his legs wrapped tightly around Izuku's waist, pulling him deeper. Izuku's fingers dug into Kurigo's hips, leaving marks on his skin as he drove into him. Kurigo's head was thrown back, his mouth open in a silent cry as he felt the pleasure building inside him. Izuku leaned down, capturing Kurigo's lips in a bruising beep as he felt himself reaching the edge. With a final thrust, Izuku came hard, his release filling Kurigo as he shuddered and gasped beneath him. Kurigo followed soon after, his body tightening around Izuku as he succumbed to the pleasure. Izuku withdrew from Kurigo, his softening cock slipping out with a wet sound. He lay down beside him. Izuku woke up to bright sunlight streaming through the window, its warmth wrapping around him like a blanket. He squinted, his head pounding from the remnants of last night, a blur of laughter, flirtation, and the thrill of a stranger's touch. He blinked, glancing around the unfamiliar room. The sheets were tangled around his legs, and the empty space beside him was a stark reminder of the one-night stand that had ended just as abruptly as it had begun. Memories flooded back in snippets. A sharp jawline, a teasing smile, and a wild night that felt more like a dream than reality. Groaning, he rubbed his face with one hand, scrunching his eyes shut. As he swung his legs over the edge of the bed and stood, a crumpled piece of paper caught his eye on the bedside table. He picked it up, recognizing the elegant handwriting that seemed to dance across the page. Had a great time last night. If you want to meet up again, text me, L. Izuku felt a faint smirk tugging at his lips, despite the remnants of a headache still clinging to him. He didn't even know if he wanted to meet R again, but the night had certainly provided a much-needed distraction. After brushing his teeth and splashing cold water on his face, he dressed quickly, pulling on a fitted black t-shirt that accentuated his newly built physique and a pair of cargo pants that allowed him to move comfortably. He shot a glance in the mirror, still grappling with the stranger staring back at him, this warmer smile flickering just beneath the sharp exterior. Once ready, he stepped into the common room where the open kitchen beckoned him, hoping to find something to stave off his hangover. The scent of coffee filled the air, and Izuku made a beeline for the counter, pouring himself a cup with steady hands. As he leaned against the countertop, he let out a sigh of relief, savoring the bitter taste that burned his throat in all the right ways. He closed his eyes momentarily, pushing aside thoughts of Katsuki Bakugo, who had been haunting his mind for days. Their last confrontation still stung, a reminder of how tense and fraught their relationship had become. No longer was Bakugo just a rival, their clash had crossed unspoken boundaries, words exchanged in anger that lingered between them like a thick fog. His mind wandered from the explosive blonde to his assistant and friend, Yumi. He wasn't sure why, but he had sent her home for a few days. Maybe it was because he didn't want her in his face, telling him what wrong things he'd done on the mission or how he promised her he wouldn't dive head in on another gunfire. Her beautiful hair and smile came into view as he leaned against the countertop and stared at the ceiling, admiring the picture in his mind. He may have ed around the previous night with a man, but that was no different to last week when he had hooked up with a woman from the same bar. It was something that was much part as the violence and trauma was. Even though some despised him for sometimes being a homewrecker and or a show-off, but after the years of being alone before and after he was friends with Yumi, taught him better enough to give af******. You look rough. Izuku's eyes snapped down at the sound of a familiar voice. He saw Shoto, his friend, leaning casually against the entrance, eyebrow raised in amusement. Thanks for the support, Izuku replied dryly, though a small grin began to form on his lips. Shoto walked closer, his mismatched eyes narrowing as he took in Izuku's appearance. Did you go out last night? You smell like a bar. Yeah, Izuku managed, his cheeks heating slightly. He couldn't help but feel a flush of embarrassment wash over him, but he masked it with a sip of his coffee. Just blew off some steam. Shoto nodded knowingly, his gaze drifting toward the note still crumpled in Izuku's other hand. And I assume that wasn't just a friendly chat. Something like that, Izuku muttered, trying to play it cool. Just as Shoto opened his mouth to continue teasing, the door swung open with a loud bang. In walked Bakugo, a scowl etched prominently on his face. Izuku's heart raced, a mixture of anxiety and lingering resentment bubbling within him. He quickly turned his back to the door, pretending to inspect the contents of the refrigerator as he fought to steady his breathing. Of all the mornings to cross paths with him. Get out of my way, Shoto, Bakugo barked, his voice taut with annoyance. Right behind you, Shoto replied, sidestepping away from the tension in the air. Bakugo strode into the kitchen, his presence heavy, and instinctively Izuku took a half step back, silently cursing himself. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, Izuku's pulse quickened. The memories of their last encounter flooded back, the anger and disappointment still fresh, and he could feel the silent air crackle between them. He didn't know how to face Katsuki anymore, not after it had all spiraled to such a violent end. Are you avoiding me or something? Bakugo's voice cut through the silence, rough and accusatory. Izuku tightened his grip around his mug, the heat radiating through ceramic grounding him somewhat. No shit, can't I have space? Bakugo rolled his eyes, the tension in the room escalating as he leaned a palm against the counter, inches away from Izuku. You think I care about your space? Izuku turned slowly, his breath hitching in his throat as their eyes locked, hers filled with frustration, his ignited with a fire he couldn't ignore. You know what? Maybe you should care. Izuku snapped back, feeling a sudden surge of anger coursing through him. The two remained frozen, caught in a standoff that felt primal, the energy between them swirling like a tempest. Izuku felt alive in ways he hadn't in a long time, but also burdened by the weight of their unresolved history. Finally, Izuku broke the gaze, spinning on his heel to escape, but Bakugo's voice stopped him dead in his tracks. Running away again, Izuku clenched his fists, turning around defiantly. I'm not running, I'm just. Just what? Bakugo challenged, stepping closer, the distance closing rapidly, equally aggravating and magnetic. I'm just tired of this. Izuku shouted, his heart racing. Tired of you. Tired of us. Bakugo remained silent, a flicker of hurt flashing across his features before his expression turned guarded once more. The world around them faded, and for a brief moment, it felt as if they were the only two left in existence. Fine, stay tired then, Bakugo spat, stepping back and crossing his arms. With that, he stormed out of the kitchen, the door slamming behind him like a thunderclap. Izuku stared at the spot where he had been standing, shock coursing through him. Had he really just said that? As the realization sunk in, Izuku felt a rush of unease. He turned back to his coffee, staring into the dark liquid as a sense of dread washed over him. Now more than ever, he felt the pull of something unresolved, a vicious cycle that seemed destined to continue. And as the hurried footsteps echoed away, he realized he was standing on the edge of a decision he had long been avoiding. Izuku took a deep breath, the bitter taste of coffee lingering on his tongue as he attempted to shake off the remnants of that encounter with Bakugo. Everything recently had to do something with Bakugo, and Izuku hated it. The atmosphere in the common room felt unbearably thick, the murmurs of conversation blending into a static buzz that barely penetrated his thoughts. He avoided the curious glances of students who had once been his friends, opting instead to focus on the tasks ahead of him. With determined steps, he found his way to the lecture hall for the morning classes. As he settled into his seat, he glanced around, the same old faces, though many had changed since he last saw them. Still, their laughter only made him feel more isolated. The professor began the lecture, his voice looping in a monotonous rhythm that struggled to engage the room. Izuku's gaze drifted to the window, where the sun hung like a golden coin in a sky that seemed almost too innocent for the tumult swirling within him. He felt his mind wander, thoughts flitting from ideas about strategy and combat to the absurdities of his current situation, like a jigsaw puzzle scattered across the table, missing pieces that once fit together seamlessly. It was in this daydream that the professor's voice faded into an inaudible drone. Izuku twirled a pencil through his fingers, a mundane act that distracted him from the waves of restlessness crashing against his consciousness. Last night's reckless abandon seemed a lifetime ago, lost in the void of his recent bitterness, and the thrill of it felt like a distant memory. As the bell finally rang for lunch, Izuku barely registered it. His stomach tightened. He wasn't ready to face anyone, much less a lunchroom filled with whispers. Instead, he opted for solitude once more. He slipped out of the classroom and into the sprawling training arena outside, the vastness of it beckoning him like a siren's call. The sun beat down on the training ground, a harsh contrast to his internal chill. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he walked the perimeter, taking in the high walls designed for physical training. He had always preferred this, the unfettered testing of his limits. Izuku took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his responsibilities settle on his shoulders as he steeled himself for the grueling session ahead. With a quick stretch to loosen his muscles, he activated his quirks. Each one unfolded within him like a flower blooming, flames igniting under the control of his fire manipulation quirk, while his enhanced agility quirk surged to the forefront, giving him an almost predatory grace. He began with basic footwork, rapidly darting from one side of the arena to the other, a blur of black and green, the agile evasion skills of his SWAT training blending seamlessly with his enhanced movements. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, synchronizing with his heartbeats in a steady rhythm as he pushed himself. He imagined the faces of villains, the thrill of confrontation, and the impending danger that always loomed. His mind flickered back to Bakugo's confrontation, sharp words exchanged, and unspoken thoughts. He allowed his frustration and anger to fuel him. He leapt into the air, flipping effortlessly as he used his wind manipulation quirk to ease him into a perfect landing. The ground shook as he hit the dirt, stabilizing himself before rolling back into a standing position. From the corner of his eye, he spotted an artificial target stationed roughly 20 meters out. Narrowing his eyes, he summoned his enhanced strength quirk and, with a fierce yell, launched himself toward the target, the ground groaning beneath him. He gathered energy, 2 swirling balls of concussive force lighting up the space in his hands. As he closed in on the target, he released, bolts of pain coursing through his body as he pushed his limits. A fiery explosion erupted on impact, sending debris scattering. Izuku's body surged forward, propelled by the force of the blast, and he rolled back to his feet. The remnants of the target fell, a hollow shell, blackened and smoking. He could feel the rush of victory enveloping him, breathing in the scent of scorched metal and the salt of his sweat. But he knew he had more to give. With a fierce determination, he turned to a series of height-adjustable training dummies spread across the arena. He approached them, activating his healing quirk as the small cuts and bruises from his previous exertions began to mend almost instantly. He focused on enhancing his speed and agility further. Ducking and weaving, he struck out with precision. His movements were random and chaotic, tactical and methodical all at once. With each hit, he felt his muscles burning, the buildup of exhaustion tugging at him, but he welcomed it. Every jab launched at the dummy felt like a slice through the haze of his earlier confrontation. 5, 10, 20 punches, he felt a sense of rhythm set in, of violence he could control. He augmented his strikes using his rock manipulation, forming agile defenses around himself as he spun and dodged, countering as shadows of unfulfilled emotions flitted in his mind. He took a step back, sweat pouring down his brow as he prepared for one last explosive move. Rushing forward, his enhanced speed quirk radiated through him as he took off, pushing himself to break through his own limits. He vaulted into the air, extending his arms wide, gathering the energy of strength into his fist as he struck the target with one last punch. The air crackled and the ground shook and split apart. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.